Welcome everyone. You are on the Leopard Tea podcast. Today we have a special episode because we are talking to a cool guy from citizenM. In fact, is the project manager for the US, the man who is responsible for the openings of citizenMs across the entire United States. Edward, is that correct?
Yeah, I did a couple, like around 10 openings in last year. Now I'm focusing on one project in Boston because it's the focus of the company this year. It's going to be our biggest development. So right now it's Boston centric, if you say.
Okay, cool. So we have a guest here, and this man has, I think, was born to work for citizenM. As long as I remember him, he always talked about it, and I think he's been one of the only people I know who stayed at the same company since I left university. So, congratulations to that, Edward. Welcome to our podcast. Thank you for joining. So, would you like to? Is that a good enough introduction? Would you like to maybe go through the boring things you've done in your life, or?
No, it depends. Like you say, you're talking about, let's say, turnover and longevity of employees in a company that I'm the only one or one of the only ones that stay in the same company. I think um, it all depends on the company and what the opportunities they give you. Like if like for me, it's been really like not that I'm married to citizenM, but for every time I wanted to have a next step or learn, like they were open to provide like next step and a new opportunity to grow. So that's why 7 years in still citizenM after uni. Let's see how long it lasts more. But yeah, so that explains a bit that lack of going around different companies.
I also have a question already because Misha said that you were born to work for Citizen M. What does that mean? I know you guys went to university together, but I don't know what that means.
I don't know either if I have to interpret it. Maybe it's because maybe I'm too casual and pretty freestyle. I think his name is kind of free spirited in many ways. Uh, like I always remember the first couple of days when we started our masters with Misha actually, and they were explaining what were the career paths that were available and then the traditional trajectories to become, let's say, like a hotel manager at the Four Seasons, and the timeline of 10 to 20 years to reach that goal. I kind of had a little introspection and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? That's definitely not going to be for me. And like, yeah, then I found Sislen that was a lot more close to my values in terms of people and the overall culture. So I think that's where it comes back to.
Give us a quick breakdown. You've been there for 7 years. In that time, I have switched 4 jobs. What have you done? What have you? What? Yeah, exactly right. What have you managed to achieve during those 7 years?
Yeah, it's definitely been a ride. So like as you know, like I to finish our masters, we needed to do an internship. So that's where I started with SysNem. We started as an intern in the operations department. And at that time, operations was all encompassing. You had a bit of everything, um, and so everything from POS management to licenses to deal with new projects linked to ESG for hotels. And at that time, we had approximately 8 or 10 hotels. So we had to do a bit of everything to support the hotels because like it's a very centralized model. Like we want the hotel teams to focus on the guests in the hotel. Everything else is done at the office. So we were a bit of the jack of all trades. And then we had 2 hotels to open in Paris towards the end of my internship. And lucky or unlucky for Cesnem, like they had a French intern, so I ended up working a lot on those, especially everything linked to licensing. As you know, like French love their laws and their rules. So I kind of fell into this, and from before System, I already felt that the opening of hotels is very exciting. It's like a shorter life cycle of the project, um, and it's a wide scope of responsibilities and duties. So when I say citizenM, I focused on the openings, especially with Paris. We had to do 2 hotels within 3 months, which was a lot of fun. We tried to make it as efficient as possible and couple things when we could, but not everything goes according to plan. And then it was a bit the time where also we already had a hotel in Paris, in Charles de Gaulle. That had been alone for a couple of years, and their F&B program, let's say, was very particular, and we needed to do a lot of work on this. So it was a bit the time to reshape what is F&B for Paris hotels. So the F&B director at that time basically gave me kind of carte blanche. He was like, you know, more or less what we want to do, affordable luxury, all the concepts that sticks with citizenM. So just go and try to figure out something cool for F&B in France.
So,
So I focused a lot on the
so far during your internship, you've worked in operations in Holland, then you've opened up a hotel in France, and then you started working on revamping the entire F&B concept of citizenM. That was during your internship.
No. So the internship ended just before we really ramped up towards the openings, and then I stayed along. We were revamping the F&B for Paris, so we did that, and then it was a bit at the end of that year. I was like, okay, do I want to stick to food and beverage and maybe take a bit more of a local like Paris duty for F&B area manager, or do I want to keep doing openings? And knowing the next one was going to be in New York, I was like, no, I'm going to go to New York. I'm not going to stay in Paris. Like, I'm not Parisian, so like living in Paris is not my dream. So I stuck with the travels and going to New York for which was the new flagship hotel for citizenM in the US. We already had a hotel, same in Times Square, but the one in Bowery was the one to really launch citizenM expansion in the US, saying, okay, we're here, we're expanding. This is the first of a new pipeline that is starting. And then the same, we had a small team to do the opening. I was focusing on the F&B, but then slowly took over operations responsibility. And going through that project, we, like a colleague and I, was like, there's a better way to do openings the way we're doing it now. It was a bit, like family office, all hands on deck. Everyone does a bit of everything. There's not really one captain on the ship for the pre-opening. So let's maybe make a position that oversees the overall timeline of the pre-opening. So that's what we did. We made the pitch to our bosses, essentially, saying like we need to restructure that section of the company, and this is our proposal. And they were like, okay, go for it. Copenhagen is the next one. Edouard tried out with this new role. We did this, worked out pretty good. It helped that Copenhagen was a pretty easy project. Like Copenhagen is a bit like Switzerland. People are pretty diligent at their work, which is really nice. It's a big change compared to New York, where everything is a bit more wishy-washy, let's say. So that was a good project to try out a new structure, and then we just said, okay, that's a proof of concept that is working.
What was the sorry? What was the what was the sort of the biggest difference outside of the cultural perspective, which we're familiar with, right? That you thought really made the big difference? Maybe just because there was kind of one person to go to, and the responsibility fell on one person, and as a result, it was easier.
Exactly, having a bit one point of contact that can distribute, that can keep the overall timeline and vision of the project, because you have a lot of departments in pre-opening, as you know. It goes everything from coordinating with brand and marketing, but also like the F&B or the learning development, everything related to OZNE. And before it was kind of divided into several people, but you didn't have really one person that could oversee and be the point of contact for the rest of the company. So you have information gets lost. You have a lot of inefficiencies, and at the end also you have a budget that you need to manage. And it's always better to have one person manage and be accountable for a budget rather than six. So that was a bit the main difference. And also make sure that everyone can deliver and has the tools and the resources to deliver what they're expected. Instead of everyone looking at each other as like, oh wait, I thought you were going to do this, but oh no, I was going to do it. that's a bit having an overview of the entire project helped a lot. So that's what we did, and then it was let's go to the US basically. They asked me, Edward, do you want to move to the US? You're gonna spend way too much time, so IRS is gonna come at you after a year if you don't if you don't transfer. After we did our Boston opening, so I said, yeah, let's do it. We had like 6, 7 hotels to open: Seattle, San Francisco, LA, DC, etc., Miami. All new markets that citizenM didn't know. So it's like, okay, if you can go there, we'll sponsor you. Go there on your visa and spearhead a bit this on the ground, and be the proxy from the support office in the Netherlands. So this was happened, and then of course every plan has a curveball, and COVID hit. So I moved to the US, and 1 week later the borders were closed. So that was a fun experience. Had to live in a hotel for in New York for 3 months while still trying to organize the opening in Seattle. So that was
You
a
were
fun
like
and stressful
you were
experience.
like Tom Hanks from the movie Terminal, except in a hotel, just stuck there.
Yes, I mean, I'll pick my experience over a terminal. Like I would say, having a 300 plus hotel to yourself, a room hotel to yourself in downtown Manhattan with a rooftop where you can do your yoga at sunset by yourself is pretty nice. So that was actually quite a cool experience, and like being able to connect also with the team that was there, where they had someone that was not a guest, but also someone that is not a direct colleague. It's like game nights and things like this. So make the whole experience a bit more fun than being stuck in a tiny Manhattan studio where you're kind of entering slowly depression. Um, so that was a interesting experience. But then we had to still open Seattle hotel, which was our first one. Our investors really wanted that hotel to open. It was delayed due to a mold issue we had with water intrusion for a year. So it was really like, okay, we really need to open it now. It's ready. So yeah, like a couple of us took the plane from JFK. It was two of us and a pigeon taking the plane, and no one else. JFK was probably the most quiet I've seen in my life, where there was only our plane on the screen of departures. So that was quite an experience. We took our bags, went to Seattle, and then had to improvise how to do a opening in pandemic where all our trainers, let's say, cannot travel. So we had, let's say, our cocktail trainer, coffee trainers. Some of them are in the Netherlands. How do we do virtual training? So we had to come up with some creative methods with like iPads over coffee machines to give a point of view, and like a trainer that is on the screen and a camera to give them live feedback. So it was a bit crazy. It was a lot of fun to innovate on the spot and be like, okay, how are we going to do this in to deliver the best impact, um, and also just make it work in have a safe environment, because everyone was still like we cannot go and all party and kiss each other. Like it's still COVID times. Let's keep it safe for everyone. So yeah, we did this, and then like the openings kept rolling: DC, LA, San Francisco, etc. And then I finished my pre-opening career in Miami with 2 hotels, one of which I'm right now. Um, and then it was a bit like, okay, what's next? 11 hotels, super fun, but now things time to learn new things. So discussing a bit with our chief development officer, I was like, yeah, like makes sense to go upstream. I would love to learn more about the earlier steps in the construction. So if you give me an opportunity, I'm down to try. So yeah, he took a bit the gamble on me. Take the young guy that knows nothing about construction and throw him in the project in Boston Back Bay, which is like one of the most important for our company this year to open, because it's going to be our biggest hotel, part of a huge development in the city. Um, and yeah, I've been doing this mostly for the last year, and in parallel, because life is not fun if you do only one thing. We've been trying to have a bit of an innovation project within the company citizenM to look at how we develop hotels, our timeline, and how can we shorten that timeline. So in the market, the development timeline is pretty long as a standard. citizenM was a precursor in terms of modular building for hotels with very short timelines. That was one of our, let's say, attributes to attract investors and make things very interesting.
Maybe to quickly
Yeah.
pause you there for those who don't know. Basically, what you guys have, citizenM is basically a chain where almost all rooms are kind of the same, right? There's a similar idea, and you, because of that, you could produce them in a factory, kind of, sort of, in a way like the block houses in Soviet Union, but nicer, obviously, right? So that's what allowed you basically to speed the whole process up, because you didn't have to create complicated rooms on site, but rather just produce them in a factory, right?
Exactly. So yeah.
What's the timeline, more or less, to build a citizenM from scratch?
So on a modular project, the best we've done is approximately 14 months from breaking ground to opening, which was a project in London that we did in Bankside. Our timeline has extended through the years, and that's why we're doing this project. In the US, it's not necessarily easy to convince local authorities or contractors to build modular. So it's a bit easier on the West Coast. So we built more hotels modular on the West Coast compared to the East Coast.
Why is it easier?
There's many factors.
I saw a lot of pain in that smile.
No, it's because from a development perspective, it always makes sense, but then it's something very new. So there can be a lot of different factors, from local regulations to just having a general contractor that is ready to change the way he's working. Like they've not done that, and you're trying to pitch a project to a contractor being like, forget construction as you know it. We're just going to give you building blocks and you need to stack them up, and then that's basically your job. And for a lot of them, yeah, like in the US, like people are pretty cautious, and especially in the industry. So if they don't know it, they're not necessarily down to play. So West Coast, we've found a couple of good partners that were ready to play with us, basically, and really like make it work and figure it out. East Coast has been a bit more difficult. So the East Coast has more traditional construction. But ultimately, with that internal project, our target is to have a development timeline of 16 months for modular projects and 18 months for construction, like from a traditional standpoint, which is extremely aggressive. We're more in the mid-20s, let's say, in the construction and traditional construction right now. So shaving off 6 months, it's a lot. But the overall idea is that our industry only looks at costs from a hard cost component, so how to build cheaper. But there's very little innovation in terms of time, and ultimately time is a huge cost factor. Like if you can open 1 month earlier, there's so many expenses that you save, whether it's just from your loan perspective, your investors, but also just the potential revenue you can generate. So looking really at the timeline and the cost perspective has been pretty interesting. And that's why we're also trying to do a bit of new ways to build, which goes back to the Lean Six Sigma methodology that we were talking about, Michel, quickly. Because ultimately, citizenM rooms, as you said, they're all the same, except maybe for your disabled rooms. It's literally a copy paste. So you should be able to build like you're in a manufacturer. Like it's really like at the concept, at the core of what it is. So how can we apply these concepts to the hotel industry and building citizen hotels
at the same time? Hospitality and construction, basically.
Yeah.
Did you go through different methodologies? Because we at Numa had kind of a different challenge, because we were taking over different projects in different locations, and there was not that element, at least yet, of the same room as much. And so what worked best was Scrum, right? It's kind of like I'm sure you're familiar with it, right? It's a methodology that goes a bit against, not against, it's different methodology to Six Sigma because it doesn't look at a factory. It looks like at an agile team. Everybody is flexible to do what they want, and you have to organize the process so that everybody can always react, and the teams are self-sufficient. But I guess for you, Six Sigma initially came from Motorola factories, and what you're doing here is a factory pure process. So it would make sense to use Scrum, for example, probably for that, or
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that citizenM has been going for the last 2 years through an agile transformation. Initially, concepts such as the whole agile surrounding methodology like Scrum, the sprints, and all those kind of things that work very well in certain teams where we try to apply it in the construction team, in the project management team. It was very difficult to manage because you're asking a team in citizenM to manage their project with an external party, which is your general contractor and their sub trades that manage a totally different way. So there's a bit too much of a clash. It was very challenging, and that's why with Lean Six Sigma, we're uh, trying to get something that is a bit more applicable to the manufacturing industry rather than to the operations or IT development industry. And ultimately, it's a lot about how can you schedule, how can you mitigate your risk in terms of timeline and your coordination. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting ride. We're really at the beginning. Even internally, we're still trying to pitch and convince people. Look, here's a simulation how to build a hotel the normal way, and just like showing them like the simulation of how it looks, and look how if you try to get as close as possible to a single piece flow rather than a batch flow, and look at the benefits. And the bigger challenge there is the benefit comes at the end for the overall project, but individual key players don't necessarily see the benefits. So if you tell your electrician you need to come to that floor 25 different times because you need to do one room at a time, they're like, this is so inefficient for me. And I totally agree, it is very inefficient. But the fact that everyone does that single piece flow, at the end, actually, it's theoretically proven that you can gain time at the end. So there's a lot of convincing and trial and error and proof of concept that we need to go through. Because yeah, like those guys have been working like this for. I mean, we've been laying bricks the same way for I don't know how many centuries. So it's not always easy to come in and tell people like, hey, there's a different method that is totally counterintuitive
So,
that actually adds value.
so would it then make sense to kind of have your own construction company within citizenM? Because as I said, just from an apartment point of view, I think, right, changing the construction industry is a very big um, point. And if people are not directly part of the company, an external company, it's even harder to kind of change their minds on how they've been working in the past.
Yeah, I mean, having your own like construction company, that could be an idea. The thing is like the general construction company is really more of overarching entity. Like at the end, it's really about the subs that are in the market, and every market can have different subcontractors. You have in the US, you see it as one country, but it could be seen as like 45 different countries. Every state or even sometimes even every city has different regulations. Uh, like union trades is a big factor. So whether you build in Boston or you build in Austin, Texas, it's a totally different ball game. The way you can build, the way you manage your trades, how many steps you have in your fit out or your construction. Just
Mm.
because how the local regulation and trade environment is structured. Um, so that would definitely be an interesting project. I think it's a lot. At the end, citizenM, we build hotels and we sell rooms. Like so, we're trying to not be too much into this. It's a lot. It's adding another trade, another side of the company that would require like quite an endeavor. I think it's really about finding the right partners. Like there are general contractors, there are companies that are willing to try, that are using those methodologies, and also how we onboard them and train them and discuss very early, when we sign our contracts and start the development of a hotel, rather than just going in a bit with the standard way, and then when we're about to break ground or they're about to start building rooms, we're like, oh, actually, guys, we want you to work in a different way. Like that's very difficult to do that. So if you from the beginning find the right partner that is open to ideas, and also like system is very particular. Like we're pretty simple, but we also have a lot of particularities. And if you understand them and use them smartly, it can make your life very easy. But if you go against it, it's actually going to make your life much harder, because
Mm.
we sometimes demand a level of quality and precision in our construction and our delivery of products that is close to an industrial precision. But the thing is, it's almost impossible to reach that level of quality and precision on normal construction sites. So that's why early enough, it's better to understand and work together what's the best method to build, so that at the end you have the smoother, the faster, and the most cost-efficient product.
So just quickly to remind me, is citizenM owner and operator for all the properties, or?
Most of the properties, there are some markets we have lease agreements, or what we call HMAs. So let's say in Geneva, or General Switzerland, Copenhagen, um, the real estate market is so expensive, let's say, and so tight
Mm.
that we cannot enter and be owner and operator. Sorry.
Okay.
And then it really depends. So we're looking, we don't want to miss an opportunity because we cannot own it. So then we have certain projects like in Chicago, or like Boston is are some of them, where sometimes you have turnkey deals, or you have like a ground lease agreement, part of the development. So it's really, but the initial concept is, yes, like we try to own our asset, where we have an asset heavy strategy that is against the market in hospitality, which has more of an asset light strategy.
Mm.
We want to have that asset heavy strategy to have a bit more control um, on our destiny, rather than just do management contracts.
Mm.
But then, yeah, times are changing. We're trying to expand, and like it doesn't mean that we're stuck to one narrative. And if it makes sense for the company and the growth of it, we're exploring more options.
Okay.
And referring back to, you said, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? A lot of hotel chains previously had hired huge teams to build, had architects, construction teams, and then, for example, for Hilton and for Marriott, I think 1989 crisis hit, and then basically 1,000 people were let go from one day to another. So this way, you keep your partners, and it kind of works on demand basis. But is there a line where you still guys hire internally? I mean, I assume you have architects, designers, or do you outsource that as
Yeah,
well?
we have a design team. A lot of them are from an architect background. So like ultimately, like our brand standard and the main concept uh, comes from citizenM. But then we have a kind of a heritage partnership with an architecture firm called Concrete from the Netherlands, that has been with citizenM since the beginning. Where they, between citizenM and them, they really hold the, let's say, the concept design of citizenM, of just the general looks and the general feel of citizenM. And then once you do that concept design, which is basically in partnership with Concrete and citizenM, um, we then go to more of a local or project-specific architects that then will dive into the specific, let's say, nitty-gritty of the project. So go from a design drawing set to a construction drawing set, and that's where those architects will have also a set of consultants from a code perspective or MEP perspective and things like this. So we really own the identity and the general feel, and then like it's more on the local base in terms of the specificities and market application to the project.
But would you say that's possible for other chains to duplicate? They do not have modular building? Because I mean, the issue comes as well, right? You have procurement, for example, right? Some companies have hundreds and hundreds of suppliers just for, OSCE, right? Or right. So the question is it easier for you guys because you have modular construction, or you're just really good at organizing your projects?
Modular definitely helps a lot. So we have two relationships with two modular companies that we've developed through the years. One in Poland, one in China. So the modular concept helps, but that's just the room component. You still have everything around it. You still have your front of house, back of house. You still have your furniture that you need to fill in. Or as you said, all your ozony. We definitely don't have everything figured out. OCD has been like through the years when I started as an intern was a nightmare. I remember to manage, and it's very difficult to find a good partner that fits our needs. We also have very specific needs, and it's also very difficult to keep a consistency in your concept throughout different continents. How can you find the same spoon at the acceptable price between Taipei, Copenhagen, and San Francisco, and also not have all our stuff shipped from one central location. How sustainable is that? So that's a bit the challenge. Is like, yeah, you can buy everything locally in Europe and ship it to the US. How sustainable is that? How cost efficient it is? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we're doing on seeing like what are things that we really need to keep.
I I share the feelings, but I have one question because I think hotel openings are kind of the place where so many things can go wrong. I think that's what I said at the beginning, right? You already made an example of COVID, and you guys had to find a way to train everybody um, over cameras. But do you have kind of another event or like a story that you can share that something went awfully wrong and you can had to solve it last minute?
This is not an interview.
Uh,
This is you're not gonna get a job after this. You already have one. Sorry.
yeah. How many hours do you have to
I just love those
your
stories.
story? So I think the biggest common challenge you have in pre-opening is that you're really at the end of the timeline, and at the end, that's really, let's say you have your 4 weeks, 8 weeks, however, whatever time frame you're usually allocated as a standard, to say from the moment the building is handed over to the operator and prepare their team and populate the hotel and then open. That time always gets squeezed because it goes back to the reliability of your construction timeline and your permitting timeline. And that's where most of the time the pre-opening team, but also the construction team, needs to be very flexible and work together. That's very important. Like at the end, like that's the benefit of citizenM, is we're all under one house. We're not just the operator that receives the hotel. So it helps a lot in terms of working as one team and finding solutions together. It also brings a lot of gray zones. So sometimes it's also a challenge because we are the developer and we are the operator. So the operator accepts a lot more and makes a lot more concessions compared to if you had like a standard management contract where the operator would come and be like, it's not ready, I'm not coming. Here it's like, well, we're one company, we want to open as fast as possible. So then everything starts to merge together and you don't have a clear cut between the construction is done to the pre-opening period starts. Things start to overlap and you want to keep a consistent and impactful pre-opening period for your teams, because like that's the foundation of your team's training and what you show as a company of what they're gonna. We expect, let's say, our ambassadors to deliver a certain guest experience. We need to show them the same courtesy in terms of the training facilities and the area we allow them and the training we give them, we need to expect as much from our side than what we expect from them to deliver to our guests. So like a story is pretty simple. Like it's happened in many hotels, but like definitely from one of the most challenging and fun, because that's the fun part in pre-opening, is the curveballs. Was during the Bowery opening, where we hired our entire team, so approximately 40 people, and that was based on a timeline that those people could start in 2 weeks, to start training in the hotel and train for 4 weeks, and then open the hotel. And the day after that casting day and hiring everyone, our project team said, "Well, actually, we're going to be a couple months late." So of course we're like, well, that's going to be fun. We don't want to just pay people to do nothing. Also, not from a just financial perspective, but like New York is a pretty dynamic market, so people will just jump off the boat and find another job. You can also not just tell them, well, hold on, we don't pay you, and then in 3 months we come back to you and you're hired and guaranteed. So we had to see, okay, while those guys are still building the hotel, how can we do our pre-opening periods off-site, um, and then we'll just figure it out basically. So like I was like we had a great team, a great pre-opening team at the time, was really working together, and I had also a lot of really good local partners, like with, let's say, like our F&B partner and caterer was very helpful in sourcing venues. So we had to source, let's say, venues from just like a general conference space to a bar during the day that we were renting out to do our cocktail training. Um, but we had to find those in 48 hours, let's say. So that was it's like the type of phone call where I would call my F&B partner and be like, "So do you have a bar for the next 2 weeks where I can have 30 people train for every day?" And they're like, "Edward, you're gonna kill me. Like, I'll try. I'll see what I can do." But yeah, figuring out all those things, and then trying to keep all your activities so you're still able to make that end opening date. So then you end up being very creative, where okay, we need to do our photo shoot of our space because we want to be able to sell our hotel. We don't want to have no pictures, but then it's like, okay, I understand that, but it's still a construction site, so how can I do a photo shoot of construction site? So then you have your styling team that is trying to do the best they can with the space, and then you end up smuggling in like hidden chariots some liquor bottles, so that within a couple of hours you set up a bar for the photo shoot and then just take it out of sight again. So that those are all things where you have to be very creative, very flexible. You need to work in the gray or a bit. At the end, you just need to make it happen. Um, and yeah, that opening was this from the beginning to the end, because we opened, we still had some floors that were not TCO'd yet, so like we could not. It was still a construction phase. Let's say our entrance plaza was partially also in construction, so we had to make specific agreement for right of passage for our guests to still to be able to access the hotel, because our team was like, well, the hotel is TCO, so certificate, like you have your certificate of occupancy, but the plaza in front of the hotel from the sidewalk is not. So we're like, well, great, but how do you access the hotel then? Like, if we cannot hand out construction boots and helmets to our guests for them to cross the plaza. So then you need to figure out a way to build a tunnel that is like a grid of the city, and all this kind of stuff. And that's where working with your construction team and your project development team is super important, because if you work separately, it's really not it's really not efficient. But if you work together trying to find a solution that they have the knowledge, you have a different set of knowledge, then you need to work together to just be like, okay, this is the best solution we can come up on the spot, and try to still deliver the best hotel in the best time, the most cost efficient ways for our guests to be the least impacted. Um, but yeah, that's I could probably write a pre-opening book
I
with all
think
the stories,
I think you
different
should.
hotels.
I definitely think you should. Honestly, like when you were talking about it, I get like this feeling again of I because I was also doing openings, right? So that feeling of, you know, it just feels like there's always something else that is coming up and something else that needs to be solved, and then I don't know, super exciting. Sometimes a little bit stressful, but sometimes also extremely fun and rewarding when you were able to do it. So yeah, it sounds like you're excited about your job, and yeah, it's nice to hear that.
It's part of the fun. It's like if you if you cannot find the fun into the changes of plans and the issues that come the way, then yeah, you're gonna hate your life. It's gonna be terrible. And that's why I always say like it's not for everyone. If
Yeah.
if you're someone that wants predictability and structure, don't go in there. It's gonna be you're gonna be like you can be great at your job, but you're not gonna be fulfilled, and it's not gonna feel good for you. If you like the uncertainty and curveballs and the challenges and having the ups and downs, and for me the most fun part of the job was trying to keep the energy at the right level. And you cannot keep pushing people nonstop. So it's about those moments to be okay. We need to do a push. Let's go. And there's also times where like, well, you know what? Shit hit the fan. Let's grab a round of shots of tequila and what can we do? We don't have AC in the hotel. That's what it is. We'll figure it out tomorrow. That's also the fun part to
Mm.
be able a bit that orchestrate that energy of your team.
I think that's a super interesting point that you're saying, and I think this is one of the points that's sometimes forgotten. If there's such a high amount of stress and pressure, that people just feel like, oh, needs to be pushed through. But yeah, think about the breaks in between as well, for sure.
Maybe we give you one more question before we jump to the news, if you have actually time to stay after this, because we're obviously going over the initially agreed time frame here. You mentioned 40 people were hired. I'm not sure if that's the exact number, right? Me and Miriam come from a background now where for a hotel with 180 rooms, there's maybe 2 or 3 people hired, right? Um, how are you guys? I mean, I've been in a citizenM. I've slept in one. I think Miriam, you have as well. You have
Yes,
done it quite a few times now,
and it
probably.
won't
You lived in
actually.
one. You lived in one, Ed. How are you planning to deal with the whole topic of well, yeah, employment, right? I know you guys have self-check encounters. You technically you don't need to encounter anyone, right? Already in citizenM. So the people you hire are there to enhance the experience, I suppose. And is that going to stay the way it
Mhm.
is?
Yeah, so with the example of the New York Bowery, where I said 40 people was a bit of an outlier in terms of amount of staff we hired, amount of ambassadors we hired for that project. It was a bit the unknown first, and like let's be safe. So let's hire. I think at the time it was exactly 37 people, but it was we had built a bit of a buffer because first we knew that some people would move on throughout the opening time. That's always happens. So you always lose some people. And then we also had we have a rooftop up there that had a lot of expectations from our company in terms of revenue, in terms of experience. So let's say we had kind of initially overstaffed a bit in order to make sure that at least at the beginning we can deliver a really good experience because we wanted to really come in. And as I said, it was like the announcement of citizenM rollout and pipeline in the US. As a standard, it would definitely not be 37. Now it's really not 37. I think the rule of thumb is our basic SysNem in terms of size is between 280 and 320 rooms. For this type of hotel, we would hire probably around 20 people that cover all the shifts, so AM, PM, and nights. And then, depending on the hotel, this means you have approximately 4 to 6 people per shift. And that covers your holidays, your days off, and things like that. We can do this also because this is just the hotel staff. Like the rest, like our maintenance teams, our housekeeping teams, are outsourced. We have local partners or worldwide partners. Because again, let's give to the experts their expertise field. We don't know how to clean rooms. Let's find the best company that knows how to clean rooms. They're going to do that. We know how to give a guest experience, how to sell rooms. That's what we know. So that's what we're focusing on. Everything else, we don't know how to fix things. We'll have a company that knows how to fix things. Like let's keep everyone's expertise. Everyone is shown. So that's what's important. Going to 3 people, like you say, at the real, like I'm not sure how you guys do it. We definitely have the check-in concepts that we're innovating to make it even more seamless through the apps and through different ways. Our guest demographic is pretty broad. We have a preferred guest demographic that is like a bit like like the businessman that knows that has their app and checks in on their Uber and creates their key card on their phone and just goes straight up, grabs a glass of wine and goes to sleep and checks out the day after. That's a bit like, wow, that's the ideal guest. But that's not also that's just from a business perspective. You also want people that stay a bit more in the space. You want a bit of variety. That's what makes citizen concept alive. If you have a living room filled with businessmen that just all come at 7 a.m. to have breakfast and leave, well, we can have a nice product, nice styling and art and furniture, but it's a bit depressing still. So and all those different type of guests have different needs. So some people require a bit more interaction, and that's where we need a bit of staff to keep that guest experience a bit memorable for those guests, whether it's just comforting them because they have a different time, like a difficult time in their life, or like a challenge with their plane, or they just want a nice cocktail to wind down after a fun day or a challenging day, or just a conversation with someone that can be your friend. Like that's really what citizenM brings more compared to, like, I would say, other companies. That is a bit more the intangible that is difficult to replicate. You can replicate our design. Like that's not easy. That's not difficult. Like the chair I'm sitting on can be bought by someone else. Having the same ambassador and the same culture training and that's a lot more intangible. That's a lot more difficult to first find and train and sustain. That's our biggest challenge and our most important challenge in right now and in the future as we grow, to keep that ambassador concept alive as it was meant from day one.
Fair enough. I mean, just F&B concepts are own, right? You have F&B concepts in a way, right? I don't think it's when you want to provide a unique experience, having a machine that makes a pizza for you and you never see anyone, maybe not the most unique or the most memorable compared to
exactly. And F&B is the same. So we know we're not F&B experts. We're not entertainers. So we will never be like some of other hotel competition where people go to their hotel for the food. That's not our aspiration. We want to give.
Mish,
We
you're not on mute.
but yeah, like we want to give an option that is nice, but that's not. I would always say during the opening, if if a guest comes to you and be like, okay, I'm in New York, I want to have an experience in terms of food. citizenM can compete compared to New York and all the concepts. So I'd much rather have them uh, share their best tip for the best tacos they know than be like, oh, well, we have a great pizza down at our canteen. That's not what it is. I would definitely in New York be like, we have a great rooftop because like the view is like I think one of the best views in terms of the rooftop is great. But we need to know our strengths and we need to know when, like at the end, it's always again the same. And then I sound a bit like a broken record. Is the guest experience. So is the guest going to remember the ambassador that gave them the address of the best taco in town, or the fact that they said that, yeah, you can go downstairs and have a pizza that is good, but not necessarily like a memorable experience. Like you probably want the former. that's what's going to stick to the guest, and the guest will remember the tacos, but they'll remember, wow, yeah, that ambassador really took care of me and thought about what would be a cool experience for me to keep and keep as a memory.
For sure. Now, I already told you before we started the interview that I read a piece of news um, this week, which I want to talk to you about, and it's the one that you guys changed PMS system. You rolled out Apaleo, and is it 7,500 rooms with?
So we had to
Mhm,
find a new solution fast, and that also was a
mm,
better solution that we had. So that's where Apaleo came in, and there was a whole project around it. That was really central. Like a lot of the resources in the company were focused on that
mhm,
because we had to. It was a survival thing.
mhm.
Um, if you tell me exactly the timeline in terms of weeks and amount of rooms, I will not be able to give you those numbers. It was indeed a very short amount of time. I know that they started switching hotels around October, November, if I remember well. And I believe that we are either done or almost done.
Yeah.
So I think the 8 weeks-ish timeline does make sense.
Mhm,
I know that the team had to, they basically had 2 to 3 days. They would come in, switch the hotel, close it off, move on, and
mm,
had to go copy, paste, and repeat. So
mm.
that was a lot of work and a lot of effort
Yeah.
um, for also a lot of different markets. We had hotels opening at the same time. So
Mm,
imagine sometimes we had Austin, let's say that opened in January, but also Rome. Those hotels were kind of in between, so they were at the end of the old solution and but at the edge of being switched. So what do you do with your teams, or do you set up your old system, or do you already set up the new system? Since you don't know exactly when the timeline is, that's also an added component.
mm.
And you need to train some teams that to be trained on two different systems within a couple of months. So that was a lot of work that was done in the last year, and then like that 8 weeks was really the final sprint
Yeah.
to turn the whole project concrete and do the switch.
Mm. I mean, to me, it is literally, I find it a super amazing example because, right, I come from traditional hospitality and I remember that it took us sometimes up to 3 months to just set up the PMS systems and how the room is supposed to go and then, right, like train people on it. That took forever. And the fact that it can be done in a few days now with a company like Apaleo and many, many big companies that have lots of hotels are not, I think they're not able to get this piece of technology. They're not able to switch and catch on to the technology trend because they're still stuck to OPMS systems. And the fact that a company like citizenM, which is huge, was able to make that change, I find it, yeah, super impressive that this was that you guys were able to do that. And I think it's a great example.
I think on that note, we can congratulate Ed or Edouard on all the achievements. It worked.
He didn't switch all the systems himself.
Or the team, and I'm sure he will pass it on to the team, right, to the company. And I mean, we've kind of run out of time in here, so thank you very much for coming over.